Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give a brief introduction to the DNUC model, and I'll preface it by saying I will go into a deeper dive with the modeling team on Tuesday to talk about the structure and approach that we're using with the DNUC model. But basically, the DNUC model, it's a mechanistic model that was designed to simulate the production of greenhouse gas emissions. And greenhouse gas emissions are really a byproduct of microbial processes that's driven by soil environmental conditions. Primarily, soil redox will be the key energy driver that favor different microbial communities and the production of different greenhouse gas emissions. So the model was developed by Chung-Chun Lee at the University of New Hampshire and has been used pretty extensively to look at soil carbon and greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture and wetland and forest-based systems. Our sort of role on this project is to see how we can improve DNUC's modeling of cover crops, both the cover crop modeling component and actually the quality of cover crops, because one can imagine that, cover crop dynamics and growth will drive how much nitrogen, for example, is taken up by the cover crop and immobilized and not available to microbes to produce N2O during the spring thaw, for example. As well as being able to model cover crop conditions will influence the impact of that cover crop biomass on soil carbon dynamics and rates of decomposition. So that's sort of one aspect of what we're doing for this project. Then once we've done that, we're asking some questions about both the short-term and longer-term impact of different cover crop strategies on soil carbon and greenhouse gas emissions, and being able to do some scenario analyses to drive the model across different landscapes. And the last component is we're really trying to figure out how to apply the model across large landscapes. And so we're actually driving the model with operational remote sensing tools like the OPTIS platform. And the idea is that can then enable us to do landscape level information on when the cover crop emerges, when it's terminated, some estimate of its vigor and biomass to drive the model at scale. So if we go to the next slide, please. And so the vision is that we're trying to build a system to help sort of build the economy for cover crop adoption potentially through ecosystem service markets. And ecosystem service markets have been hampered by sort of two main barriers. One is the heavy costs of verification and validation of management practices. So that's where operational remote sensing tools can come in and alleviate that barrier. The second is scientifically rigorous tools that can capture the interactions between different management systems. So as one introduces cover cropping into a crop rotation system, what is the impact on N2O and soil carbon? And so our vision is, to basically connect satellites all the way down to soil microbial processes. And one partner that we're working with right now, for example, is the Ecosystem Service Market Consortium. It's a consortium over 50 stakeholders in the US that are trying to remove the barriers to ecosystem service markets, and have chosen to use the operational OPTIS platform for verification and DNUC for quantification of greenhouse gas emissions. If we go to the next slide, I know we're running out of time, but our work to date on this project has focused on how we can integrate remote sensing to improve cover crop biomass prediction with the DNUC model. So I'll just focus on the upper right panel. In collaboration with Stephen's group and others, we have data from BARC, 11 different cover crop sites where we actually tried to use a direct observation of remote sensing data using a canopy structure dynamics model to basically quantify FA-PAR and model biomass development, with the idea being we then would constrain and drive the DNUC model to look at the environmental outcomes. And the scatter plot on the upper right shows that I would say 9 out of those 11 sites we did reasonably well estimating biomass, and we're digging in deeper to try to understand where our remote sensing estimates diverge from the field measurements at sites 3 and 4. And so I think at this point, to get us back on track, I'll stop here, and I'll have a discussion with the modeling group on Tuesday in more depth. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bill. Really excited about the work that we're doing together on this. So thanks for that. Can we advance the slide? So I'm going to be really brief to try to catch us back up here. I'm going to turn a 5-minute presentation into a 1 minute if I can. All of you, many of you on this network are going to be getting this Forage sensor box. This Forage sensor box, we've been working with a prototype, will be called the Crop Circle ACS 214, developed by Holland Scientific, but really the original R&D came out of the Noble Research Institute under Twain Butler's lab. And here we're integrating multispectral measures with LiDAR and ultrasonic sensors to greatly improve our ability to estimate biomass. Next slide, please. You can see in that bottom left corner there that, whereas historically satellite imagery might get us about 1,500 to 2,000 kilograms per hectare of biomass estimation, by linking up LiDAR, that's really building a more of a structural kind of like response surface analysis that integrates cover and height and does that, almost generating a kind of a leaf area practically in there. It gives us better estimates of that structure for estimating biomass and lets us get well beyond just that 2,000 range. So the breeding team has been calibrating this technology across many different species of cover crops for the last year. We'll be rolling out this new technology to the network soon for you to be able to be applying to the on-farm networks and on-station research projects. And there'll be more to come about how we deal with that infrastructure to support that. But just to be brief, I'll cut myself off there and switch to Dean Hively. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the onboarding schematic. Let's just skip that.
Great, thank you everybody. Dean Hively here. I work across the parking lot from Stephen in Beltsville. Next slide, please. I'm going to be talking about what we can do with satellite imagery for monitoring cover crops. As you know, cover crop performance varies a lot in the landscape. What can we see from multispectral or hyperspectral satellite imagery? Next slide. Plants reflect very brightly in the near infrared, just beyond where we can see with our eyes, and they absorb in the red. That's what makes them green. So here's an image of a farm where fields with high biomass show up as red in this image, and fields with no biomass show up as gray. So we can get a pretty good relationship between biomass and reflectance. Again, as what Steve just said, around 1,000 or 1,500 kilograms per hectare, these indices tend to saturate. Next image. If we put together a time series analysis here, all of the points and triangles on this graph are imagery dates from Sentinel and Landsat imagery. These are free imagery sources combining NASA and European resources. If you look at the vegetation index, NDVI, on the y-axis, you can see we start in August with high NDVI. This is a corn crop. As it dries down and becomes ready for harvest, you see a decrease in NDVI. The gold line is the date that a cover crop is planted. This is wheat in this case on October 8th. And then using remote sensing and some mathematics to look at the phenology, we can see a green update 2 weeks later on October 23rd, and then follow growth of this cover crop until a winter maximum growth of 0.6 around January 31st. And once you get pretty hard frost weather, the NDVI can start to dwindle a little bit. Next slide. For contrast, here's a corn crop drying down, followed by no cover crop with no increase in NDVI over the winter time, except maybe very slight weed growth. Next slide. And then if we follow this into the spring, here's a legume cereal cover crop that's bumping along around NDVI 0.4. Maybe that's about 500 kilograms per hectare of biomass. And then you can see with the springtime green up, once the landscape starts warming up in the spring, that's the spring growth of this cover crop that we're seeing with that peak, followed by herbicide in mid-April and again end of season. And then the last peak you see starting to grow in May is the subsequent corn or soybean crop growing. So we can pull for any field or any sampling location a maximum winter NDVI, a maximum spring NDVI. Next slide. And then correlate that with percent ground cover, pretty good relationship up to about 80% ground cover. and with biomass, pretty good relationship up to about 1,500 kilograms per hectare. Beyond that, you can use radar from satellites. You can use the sensors on the highboy. We also are working on correlating for nitrogen content now using Red Edge. We're collecting data about that this year. Next slide. At BARC, we have access to this Venus satellite with a good return frequency in many Red Edge bands. It gives us the opportunity of sampling to calibrate for nitrogen content, possibility of directly measuring that in the future. It also allows us to explore this concept of, can we use spatial variability in the field to inform where farmers might go out and collect samples. So in the center image there, you see the blue dots are areas of high and low biomass in the field. So looking at management zones within fields. Also, you're able to perhaps look at early season analysis to see if we can predict late season performance. How much biomass will there be after the indices saturate? Next slide. Just tying back into what Steve just covered, the highboy data set is being collected at these same locations that we are collecting satellite imagery and biomass samples. We'll be working up that data this summer. Next slide. And we're also doing some airborne hyperspectral flights with UAVs, so getting full spectrum data here to see what else we can talk about crop residue or nitrogen content. Next slide. So where's this going? We're working on overcoming limitation of NDVI saturation. We're looking at the use of Red Edge for measuring crop N content. And we're looking to feed these type of remote sensing data streams into growth models and decision tools. Last slide, please. Next slide. And looking to feed these products out in a way that's useful for the on-farm network. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. We're off to the Danish team around the weed cameras. It looks like we'll get video played here.
Hello, my name is Ramos, and yeah, I'm a senior researcher and agronomist, but you mainly will have contact with Søren, who soon will be a postdoc here at Aarhus University. But I'll give a brief status, 5 minutes, it's not a lot, on the sample or the camera, weed camera. And in this context, it has been used for mixed crop. I have shared a link so you can zoom and have more detailed images here and videos due to the lack of time. But if we take a look at the system here, it consists of a processing unit and power unit. But it's two kind of separate systems. So you have the camera here, and you have a PC for each of them, or computer. That's it. And then, of course, in order to handle rain and dust and all that stuff, we have an inlet of air, and that is coming out here. So kind of trying to keep it clean. And of course you have a carrier that can be an ATV, or it can be a tractor or whatever. And we can go, normally we go approximately 45 k's power, k's PM, not per minute, power. Okay, that is K power. English and Danish mixed. But if you take the camera here, there's approximately down to the ground, there's 1.5 meter here, depending on what optics you're using. And the area here is, that is approximately 1/4 to 1/5 square meter. And what we aim on is to have approximately 400 images, IMG, per hectare. And a capacity of, when we are going, it'll be 20 to 25 hectares per hour. That's the capacity. Half of my time used, not to stress you and myself. There's a video where you can see me driving there. There are some sample images in a mixed crop stand, where Søren here probably will have uploaded some images showing the capability with a new model he's developing. But the idea here is that when you're finished driving, it's just turn on recording, and then record images. Then you put in your small USB key, and it will upload to that one. And that key you will upload to Søren or server, and he will process it for whatever analysis. If you want the images, you need to collaborate with Søren, and he will extract it to you or tell you how to do it. That's the general idea with the camera. We can use a mobile phone, but we realized when we are sitting on an ATV, we want to work, we don't want to play with a phone. There's an example of an image where there was growing nothing. You can see the video, very dusty. And when we zoom into that one, we can see that there's a clear difference, even though it seems like there was no wheat emerged yet. We can see that clear difference was because the year before it was two different fields with different history. What we are working on now is getting the capability of recognizing real weeds like these. This is cleavers. You can see how different they are. Some has been sprayed, some haven't, some is stressed, some are heavy or occluded. And we need to handle that. So we are trying to link to this database. You can use it too with 47 different species. These very clear images to real life. And we are getting there, but it's a hard one when it comes to wheat. It's, sorry Søren, a lot harder than what Søren is using at the moment, or working on these mixed crop stands. But for you, when you want the camera in the project, we are working on making a handover to AgroIntelli, which is the partner in this project. So when you want a camera or these cameras in your project, the project Søren is working on, then you will order it via AgroIntelli and they will build it and service it. But it'll be kind of what we are working hard on, getting production ready and reliable to an extent where we will ship it to you. That was 5 minutes and a little more. And if there's a question, Søren will answer it or I will.
Wonderful. So glad that we're working with these guys, and it was a great presentation. We're going to transition now into Paula talking about the stress cams. Paula?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Glad to stay here with you. My name is Paula Ramos. I'm postdoc in the NC State University. And I will talk with you about the stress cam. It's an IoT device. It's a beautiful project that we want to put a lot of things in this little box. The artificial intelligence, the computer per se, and the camera system, and maybe a lot of sensors. The idea with this camera is take images in the field. We have in this moment database to soybean, and we are making the database for corn right now. The camera taken images every 15 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on the crop, and the camera have this information, and we need to make the machine learning stuff to understand the behavior of the plant when the plants of the crops are stressed because of the water. Next one, please. And we have different versions of the camera. We tested the camera last summer, and we realized different problems there. 60% of the cameras present some malfunction because of the hardware part, because of the head of, outside. The outdoor conditions are critical for us. And another thing that we realized was the system was like powered down because of the time that the camera was on in the field, as well that the power system for the solar panels was not enough, and we redesigned the system. We put more power in the solar panels, and as you see here in this graph, in the dotted lines, you can see we have more power because of the solar panels, and we reduce the power consumption of the camera. We test 5 cameras this spring to put in the field the next 50 cameras this summer, and the whole cameras are working perfectly without problems in the power part. As well, we install like a cooling system in the camera to improve the temperature inside of the box. You can see here, this is the Raspberry Pi, it's the computer, it's a tiny computer. And here you can see the Hively Pi, and the Hively Pi, the Hively Pi is a real-time clock. You can see here 2 boards, 1 mini fan, and the air vents. And this is the cooling system. As well, this is the camera version number 2. And we are making right now the camera version number 2.5. And this camera has more sensors because we want to improve not only the images that the camera is taking, and we can put here like canopy temperature sensors and light sensors. Next one, please. We are taking these images, and as you see here in this slide, we can see different behavior of the plants. This kind of images is necessary that people, the humans, annotate the images, and we need to keep the hour and date in these images to create these annotations. With these images annotated, we create a machine learning algorithm. In this last year, we create like a competition in the NC State University in the electrical computer science department. And more than 200 students work in this competition, and we select one of these algorithms to put this algorithm embedded in the camera, in this tiny computer that I told you. This was a big challenge for us because we have a lot of hardware limitations to process the information inside of this tiny computer, and we need to use different kinds of libraries to process the machine learning algorithm and model inside of the camera. Next one, please. As well, this camera is right now integrated with different platforms, web platforms. This camera is a real IoT device. We have 2 different integrations, one with IBM. You can see here we have like a platform. We can connect with the platform as farmer or as researcher. You can see here different information of the camera, the canopy temperature, air temperature, the temperature inside of the box, only to check that the camera doesn't increase the temperature more than 60 Celsius. As well, we can here in the IBM integration, the device management, and we can see the data that the sensors and the sensor and the wireless stress model with the machine learning stack is processing inside of the camera. This machine learning algorithm is working in real time. In the Microsoft integration, we have another history. We are integrating this camera with the fan beats, but in this case, we don't have right now device management. The camera is sending and is pushing the images in a blob storage. With this information, we can improve our database and run the machine learning stuff in a different computer. Next one, please. In this moment, in these last months, We improved the camera in the cooling system, in the power system with the solar panels, in the machine learning and machine vision stuff. In the next year, in the next months, we need to improve the communication of the camera in the field. And the plan of this is connect the camera with a different technology. We are planning to use the TVY spaces to connect the camera in the field, also with cellular connection. Next one, please. And this is the plan. Last year, and the last summer, we installed the cameras only in North Carolina state. But this year, in this moment, we are installing the cameras in 2 states, Maryland and North Carolina. The next year, we are planning to put the cameras in 10 states, in 2 years in 23 states. And this is the idea, improve the camera and integrate the improvements that we are making. And that's it, thank you so much.